And this is the second time that we've had the FT Winter in Switzerland, but it's the 16th year that we've had the FT. FT obviously starts for Follow the Entrepreneur. A lot of people, particularly in financial centers, say follow the money, but we've always been a believer to follow the entrepreneur because the capital follows ideas. It always has, and it always will. So the most important people to know and to have the best, what I always say, systematic access to the best entrepreneurs in the world are the entrepreneurs, right? And that's our job as investors and venture capitalists, is to actually to know how to get into conversations with the best. And that's why I feel really privileged that so many of you chose to come for a couple of days to spend time with us here in Switzerland to get to know each other. The Follow the Entrepreneur is really, it's a club, it's a community, and you'll see that the people that you meet here are people that you'll want to build relationships with, and there's a lot of peer-to-peer activity and sharing of information and so forth, and we'll talk about that going forward. The other thing that we do, though, is we put together investments. We're doing that in Theo. Theo and I will be talking, Theo, I know that I'm looking at him. There he is, right there, Theo Antonio. And I will be talking about our asset management business. We'll be sharing that with you. We have a number of investors here in the room today. Christine actually has come from Astenor. So thank you very much for coming. Astenor is one of the leading agriculture tech. You actually say, I think, between nature, agriculture, and food. How do you...
Yes, perhaps I can just say...
Please.
A few words. So it's really about the bioeconomy, replacing petrochemical processes with biological processes that are enzymatic driven. So agri-food tech is a large vertical. Food alone is a 10 trillion economy. We have about $1 billion under management right now in different venture funds. And we are about to raise a growth equity fund. Why? Because in the current market environment, it is quite difficult to raise a C. That might be the last one to a trade sale or an exit. So the moment you will need to raise 150 million in the current market environment, it is going to be quite difficult. That's why we are raising an up to 1 billion growth equity fund in our vertical.
So Christine's business partners are George Coelho and Eric Archambault, two of the most important venture capitalists. I've known them both since my first Tuesday days back in 1998. George founded Intel Capital, then Benchmark Capital Europe, and then worked with the Brenninkmeyer family. So thank you very much for coming. And there'll be people coming in during the day, so not everybody was able to be here from 9 to 6 every day and in the evenings and so forth. So there'll be lots of opportunities. So make sure that if you don't have your name badge, which are upstairs, that you get a name badge, and we'll be connecting everybody throughout. A lot of the information I'll put on the WhatsApp group, so if you need the Wi-Fi cable. But this morning, what I wanted to do for the 19 of you who filled out the survey, so I want to thank you, first of all, for having filled out the survey. I thought I would go through so we all know what the tempo and the feeling in the audience is of the various people. So who here actually did the survey? I want to thank you all. So thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So the survey said, do you believe that 2024 is going to be a positive year for the world? What do you think this group said?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we were overwhelming. Not surprisingly, out of 19 people, we have 13. So we don't know who the 6 were that don't believe that 2024 is going to be a positive year, but maybe they haven't shown up or they decided not to come, because this is definitely a group of people that believe that 2024, because we make it positive, right? Because we are the society's problem solvers. So that was not surprising for me. The second one, also, do you self-identify as an entrepreneur? Because not everybody actually, but it's interesting that when you say, do you self-identify as an entrepreneur, overwhelmingly, we have only one person out of 19 that doesn't self-identify as an entrepreneur. So there again, not too... this one was good. With $1 million of unexpected funds arriving into your bank account, what do you do? Well, we had, the answers were buy gold, buy Bitcoin, keep it in the bank, invest in a tech company that you found at the FT Winter, go shopping on Bahnhofstrasse, buy a villa in Kia Valley, invest in EcoSquared Multi-Manager. That's a plug for us. I don't know what to do with $1 million. Luckily, nobody said that. So overwhelmingly, we said, we had 10 out of 19 responses, invest in a technology firm that you met at the FT Winter. So thank you all for that. And then the second one was keep it in the bank. So we'll have to find out who your banker is just to make sure that you're safe, because we all know what's been going on there. The third response was buy gold. So we have more buy gold than Bitcoin in this group. So that was also interesting to me. Nobody actually said buy Bitcoin, so we'll have to deal with that. This is one of my favorite sayings, and certainly almost like the mantra for Follow the Entrepreneur is society works best when it's organized around the entrepreneur, right? Something which I've been saying for I don't know how long, because it seems so obvious to me that that society's problem solvers are entrepreneurs, not just business people, but problem solvers, right? And the first time I said that, somebody really counter was I don't know, about 6 years ago, and he said, well, what about the fireman? I said, well, no, of course the fireman is really important, but we don't organize society around the fireman, right? We organize society around the entrepreneur. And indeed, this group said overwhelmingly 16 out of 19 said that they agree a society works best when it's organized around the entrepreneur. Only one person was confused by the statement. So there you go. I came to the FT Winter 2024 to raise capital, to meet entrepreneurs, to share my ideas on stage, to hang out with Julie, and to see my Swiss private banker. And there we had a split. Nobody is here to see their Swiss private banker. At least nobody is actually admitting to it. We have people here equally to raise capital, meet with entrepreneurs, and to share ideas on stage. And one person who I hope that he or she will disclose to me, one person is here to hang out with me. So thank you. And then I believe that a lasting peace will be achieved in Palestine and Israel in 2024. What do you think? Which way do you think this group swung in terms of yes or no? No. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have out of 19 responses, 14 disagree that a lasting peace will be. There's 4 that agree with that statement. So those are the diehard optimists. We're really glad that those people are there. I'm more optimistic about my life today than 10 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
16 out of 19 people are more optimistic. Clearly, somebody chose not to answer the question. It was too difficult for them to understand. My biggest concern is losing weight, my company's finances, world chaos, climate change, and my children's future. What do you think the winner was in that group? Interesting, we did have 4, but the split on the 5 was my company's finances, world chaos, and my children's future. And then I believe that the world is basically corrupt. Which way do you think that this group swung on that?
Yes. Yeah. Where do you live?
Unfortunately, 11 out of 19 people agreed with the statement that I believe that the world is basically corrupt, which is really sad. That would, and 8 people disagree with that. And the final question is, I'm looking forward to learning most about this company. We have a strong showing from BPN Capital, Digital Global Systems, Spectrum Alchemy, Space Perspective, Baltic Hydrogen, Gropius, Quickshift, Solaris Suborbital, New Energy Technology, Kia Valley. Pretty much there was a distributed across, everybody voted for different ones. So it looks like there's strong interest in the companies here this morning. So without further ado, the 2024, if you enjoy the next couple of days, and today we have a full day of presentations, and we have a really interesting lunch for you. Tomorrow we have another full day of presentations. Tonight we have a reception. Tomorrow we're going out to fondue out in Kusnacht at the Hotel Son. And then we have some kind of open days on Saturday and Sunday for scheduling kind of work streams, follow-ups for peer-to-peer, bilateral discussions and so forth. But we do these events throughout the year in Greece and in Switzerland and so forth. So we hope that you'll enjoy, and you'll give us your feedback on how we can keep on making it better. So we have, are we all set to go in terms of, and Kirill, I think what you're going to do is you're going to share your laptop, and people are going to be able to run their own presentation off of your laptop. Yeah. So let me introduce our first speaker, a special guy, and I'm really glad that he came. Bruce and I go way back to my days at INSEAD. When I first met him, I was coming out of INSEAD, and very keen to work with him because he, as you'll see, he's a very impressive industrialist and investor, advisor to some of the most important companies in the world. The Applied Value Group is one of the things I asked him to share, so that which may be a resource for you, he may be an investor for you, but he's a tremendous individual with incredible global perspective. And I'm really glad that you made the trip to come into to Zurich today. Thank you. Would you please welcome Bruce Grant?
So to wake you up, I was born and raised in New York City, and everyone knows that it's I think Queens, the borough of Queens, where I went to school, has the highest amount of ethnic diversity in the world. And even then, back in the days in the mid 60s when I went to school. And so there's a little story here where a teacher was trying to, in a history class, trying to find out in this diverse population which person has had the greatest significance on Western society or Western culture. And so, of course, she first points to an Arabic little boy, and he goes, Muhammad. And then the teacher goes, Muhammad, very important, has had significance, and especially, the Muslim world, but that's not the person I'm thinking of. And then she goes to a little Indian girl, and the Indian girl goes, one of the significant gods in Hinduism, Shiva, and then that's not the right answer, and the beat goes on as the song was before, and and she's wondering, how am I going to get the right answer here? And so she pulls up a $10 bill and starts waving and saying that if you answer correctly, then you'll get the $10 bill. And then all of a sudden, I'm actually half Jewish, so for the record here. So little Aaron is sitting in the last row there, and he starts waving, teacher, 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 I know the answer. And then she goes, okay, Aaron, speak up. And then he goes, it's Jesus Christ. And then the teacher goes, yes, that's the right answer, but you're Jewish. Why didn't you say Moses? And then little Aaron's response is, you understand, teacher, that Moses is Moses, but business is business. So that's a little of my background, half New Yorker Jewish, half Swedish. My mother was Swedish. Unfortunately, my dad died when I was 10, and my mother chose to bring my sister and myself and our grandmother along back to Sweden. So I had probably my more formative years in Sweden growing up, and then as a family, when I got my own family, we moved to Boston because of a job running Arthur D. Little North America out of Boston. So we lived there 17 years, and the last 11 down in Florida, in Jupiter, Florida. So it's been back and forth, but I've done probably last 25 years between 1 and 2 trips, never less than 1, and many times 2 trips a month back and forth between the U.S. and especially Scandinavia. But of course, we do work in other countries in Europe as well. So the Applied Value Group was started by the late Jan Stenbeck. Does anyone know of the name Jan Stenbeck? Excuse me?
Guitars. That's what I can think of.
No. So he was voted the entrepreneur of last century at the Millennium Party in Stockholm by the Business Journalists Association, and there were a lot of great companies that got started in Sweden that are really big and purely global. But the reason why he got the prize was that every one of them, like the guy who started IKEA or Tetra Pak, they were a one-trick pony. They could only do it in one industry. He did it in multiple industries, in paper and pulp, in telecoms and media, even private banking in Luxembourg, and so on and so forth. So he won the prize, and he was a great guy to work for, but unfortunately he died of a sudden heart attack in Paris now 21 years ago. Time flies. But he owned 30% of the management consulting firm that we had, because I worked as a advisor to him when I was at Arthur D. Little, and then he said, why don't you join me? And then so my role there was that I was on all of the public company boards as a young guy. I was like 38 or so when he put me on all of his boards, and then we used the management consulting firm Applied Value to kick the tires, to do M&A, to go out and do MBA recruiting, and that's how I met Julie, and which we did at Harvard, MIT, Stanford, and INSEAD, and but but once again, then I had to, choose, should I go to a large corp and take an executive job, or among some of my clients where I had a chance, or go into private equity, or basically become an entrepreneur. So I chose the latter, and I'm very happy for that. So let's see where, here we go. So today the Applied Value Group really has three legs of the stool. We have investments, we'll get back to that. Management consulting, which was the first company that we started and is a core piece of all what we do, and we'll get back to that. And then also social impact. And you can say that everything we do in social impact really has, there's so many needs in the world, and we do in the survey, people said that the world is messed up. It's more than messed up, and so we can shoot rockets every day from Cape Canaveral. Where is our space friend? There we go, and we can solve the most mysteries and cancer, but we can't solve the whole area of poverty, and not only material poverty but also emotional poverty, but that'll be the last thing I talk about. So we take that very seriously. But they're using entrepreneurship, just like Julie said, is that I think that's how you solve poverty, not by writing social security checks or giving big amounts of money to corrupt governments in Africa and Asia and Latin America, but to work with entrepreneurs there. So,
Amen.
So that's who we are, and this is a little my background. Why I shaded this was my time with Jan Steenbeck, and where I learned basically everything about entrepreneurship from him. So, just a snapshot in numbers. Last year, we haven't closed or we haven't audited the books. So, but the best our CFO could give me was that it's around 400 million US in revenues, the companies that we control, 62 million in EBITDA, more than 1,000 employees, more than 800 clients. We've made 67 investments, whereof 44 of them are investments where we control the companies. The other ones are more tech bets or minority stakes in high growth companies. And then on the social side, 600,000 lives impacted from the work that we've done. So when it comes to what we call control and significant investments, we're in basically 5 verticals here: professional services and IT, healthcare, building materials and components, food and beverage, and real estate. When it comes to the minority investments in high growth companies, tech, media, healthcare, mining, building, clean energy, food and bev, and consumer products, and then financials and VC. Any questions so far? So without going into in detail each company, what they do and what they don't do, I thought I would talk about our methodology that we call lean growth, because Jan Steenbeck used to, when we were at capital market days and all of the analysts was trying to get their heads around how we could be so successful in our industries where we basically were always higher growing and more profitable than our peers that were much bigger than we were. And that's where I came up one day with the notion of lean growth. And the notion is it's not just a management consulting buzzword. It's that too, but it's lean. So before you push the accelerator on a company, they have to get their act together. They have to have systematized their processes. They have to be lean. And the opposite, I would say, is the Silicon Valley model, where you have a couple of really bright kids. They have a really significant idea that the investors believe in, and then they just throw tons of money at them. That's how you corrupt a business, basically. So we have a very different way of working with our high-tech businesses. The same way we treat all companies from all industries the same way. First, you get their ship in order, and then you give them money to grow. But if you do it the opposite way, it's a disaster. And then he said, "Can you come up with some kind of a metaphor for this?" And then when I was thinking about it, my wife was in because when we lived in Boston or outside of Boston in Acton, we had 16 acres, and she loved doing gardening. Now we have like a half an acre in Florida, so there is no gardening to do now. But anyhow, so she was on her knees de-weeding, one of the flower beds. And I thought about that. That's a wonderful metaphor, that a company really is like a garden. And that's why at the very top, our top investment vehicle is called Garden Growth Capital. So how do you make a garden grow beautifully? It's by de-weeding it every day. What happens if you don't? Then the weed grows much faster. It sucks out the nutrition from the flowers or the vegetables or fruit trees or whatever, and they die, and the weed takes over. And that metaphor, you probably could say to some extent about political corruption. That's why the world has, two-thirds of people starving to death, basically, and if not to death, really close to death. I think so that's where the Japanese came in the 80s and spoke about their Kaizen, continuous improvement. So you don't have to make these leaps if you every single day do a little bit better than you did the day before. So that's what we call lean growth. And so I'm just giving a couple of examples, both from consulting and our own. So we have Vesta Wind Systems. So one of my dearest friends, and he's a co-investor with us, and he sits on some of our boards. I'm on some of his boards, etc. And he was brought in after Ericsson sold their 50% of the shares to Sony Ericsson because he was the CEO. Sony wanted him to run Sony Mobile, but he didn't want to move to Tokyo, so he left. And shortly thereafter, he was asked to sit on the board at Vestas and even become chairman of Vestas. And Vestas today is by far the world's largest wind power company. And we're the only profitable, and why I say we, I've been on their main board for 5 years. And our key competitors are Siemens Gamesa, or now it's called Siemens Power Systems, and then it's General Electric, and then it's a German company as well called Nordics. And everyone besides Vestas is unprofitable, which is crazy because everyone wants wind and solar to grow, and how can you grow when you can't even cut a profit? And that's because of the buying power. You remember Porter's, strong customers, strong suppliers. That's exactly where the wind power industry is. So anyhow, when Bert became chairman, the stock price was 28 Danish kroner, spring of 2012. And as I wrote here, 12 out of 16 banks wanted out of the bank consortium. So it was a real shit show, to talk New York slang. And now it's 965, but just a few days, 2 weeks ago, stock price was over 1,000. So you can see that there's been huge shareholder returns. So if you put your money in 2012, you really didn't have to do anything more in your life, basically. So, and then the question is, how did we do that? So I'm trying to use the 3 steps of lean growth, which is focus. So business focus on the right products, the right services, focus on the right countries to be in, the right distribution channels, using the right suppliers, et cetera. So you focus your business proposition. Then simplicity is that when you're focused, now all of a sudden you can take layers out of an organization. You can also streamline your organization. There's so many things you can do once you do the first step of focus. And then at the end, it's speed. And that's where I learned the mantra in the Steinbeck group was that people talk about economies of scale, that it's so important to grow because then, you can basically have lower SG&A per sales dollar. So everyone says that our fatness in our company, it'll go away as soon as we grow, which is BS, by the way. But anyhow, for us, speed was the most important thing. And if you think about it, if you do things in half the time, you need half the staff. If you do things in half the time, you need half of the working capital. And the story goes on. So speed is something that we focus on very much, and very little tolerance for people who are slow. Yes.
Do you do a lot of the determination of the leanness? Like, is it a formula where you can say on our index you are at the top of lean growth? Is that how you
Right.
do it?
We do. We have benchmarking databases galore. So anyhow, and then so in the Vestas case, it was very much the business focus was to, and even to this day, it's important to walk away from poor contracts. I mean, we're not in business to just deliver; we're in business to make money. So that was something that we said that we don't care. We can even shrink in size if that's what we need. So it was a focus on growing but profitable customers. And the second thing was the service business. So that was the best decision. And Bert actually ran global services at Ericsson once upon a time. So that business today is a 25% EBIT business and growing like crazy. And you also control in a different way, so that in over 100 countries we actually monitor on a continuous basis where the wind is coming from, how strong it is, and all of this data we use, and with now more and more AI, we can predict very much more the output for our utility customers. So anyhow, this is what you'll see in the other cases. Here we go, Söderfors Steel. So this company was in distress. It was, or it is, still alive and kicking. So it's a stainless steel forging company that still sells mainly to the oil and gas industry when building oil platforms, etc. And but we didn't sell to the end user. We sold to Sandvik, and which is one of the world's largest specialty steel players. And when we got a hold of the company, it was minus 12% EBITDA, and it had been 3 years in a row. And the Norwegian public company who owned it was basically going to declare not only Chapter 11 but Chapter 7, so bankruptcy. And there we thought that we could actually turn it around, which we did. So we basically took over, negotiated with the banks, etc. So we took over 7 million kroner, basically not even $1 million of debt. And then we got to work. So in 1 year, we came to break even. And then after that, slowly but surely moved up to, I think I wrote it somewhere, 22% or something like that, EBITDA. Yeah, 22% EBITDA during these years. So, but it was the same thing, focus on what business was good for us. Number two was in simplicity. We basically took out 2/3 of the staff there, and still were able to produce as much or more. and then speed. So on average, we cut all of the lead times by 60%, and we were able to sell it for 145 million compared to the 7 EV, and we also took out about 150 in dividends during that trip. So, and the company was basically, the Norwegians couldn't really, handle it anymore, so they couldn't run it profitably. River Meadow, another interesting story. So River Meadow is based out of Silicon Valley. It's a software company. We started it from scratch together with other investors, and basically what it is it's a low touch software platform for migrating applications and workloads from on-prem data centers up to public clouds, up to private clouds, between public and clouds, and between public and private clouds. So we usually call it a digital moving company. And but that was run the Silicon Valley way in the beginning, and I won't go through everything. You can read it later. But basically, we had a really good sales guy who was the chairman and one of the founding partners, and he was really good at duping people and getting their wallets opened. But then, he didn't know how to run a company to save his life. And we just threw so much money. So all in all, I think the investment has been $54 million, but we probably wasted 40 of them. But then, we kicked him out, and then I took over as chairman, and we took out two, which is interesting in software. So you have two-thirds of the engineers we actually asked to leave because we couldn't afford it. We didn't. The investors, where we were one of four standing, we just couldn't take the hemorrhaging anymore. So we made a bet that we actually could get as much done with a third as with all of them. And not only did we actually wrote 3 times the code. So we basically had a productivity increase among code writers of 10x. And that's where software, I think, the most important thing is not cost per software engineer, but productivity output per engineer. So a lot of people go, to Bangalore and get 5 football teams of semi-qualified code writers, whereas if you had 2 in Silicon Valley or 2 in Sweden or 2 in any other high-tech country, that many times is better. So we learned our lesson that way. It's not how many people you have, it's the quality of the people that you have in code writing. So anyhow, today we're doing extremely well. We did $11 million in revenues last year and $4 million in EBITDA in this year. The forecast is to do 25 and 15. But we also, towards the end of this year, are planning to exit the company. We've been with it for 11 years, so we think that it should be a part of like a Microsoft or a Oracle or Dell or someone who has global reach. Because right now our Salesforce can't reach fast enough, but there's huge value in the software. So if you would plug it into a Microsoft, for example, they would be able to make a lot of money on that acquisition. So there are 2 acquisitions that were made before COVID. They were hemorrhaging. They were smaller than we are now. And that was Velistrada in London was acquired by Google Cloud, and then the year after, AWS acquired an Israeli company from Tel Aviv called Cloud Endure. So and those transactions were 200 and 250 million. So hopefully we can get a lot more than the 250 million, but we'll see. So But this just shows that you actually can use the lean growth methodology even for a pure software startup. So, and then the last example of lean growth is Hand in Hand, and that's probably the organization that's closest to my heart. And on Sunday, I'm going down to Nairobi because our African headquarters are there. And so what we've been able to do for 20 years, I came on the board 3 years after it started. The guy who started it actually lived here in Zurich many, many years, and then he also lived in London after that. But he was the one who merged the ASEA with Brown Boveri, which you get ABB from. So he was the first CEO of ABB, and then he became non-exec chairman of that, and then he became executive chairman of the whole Wallenberg empire. And the Wallenbergs in Sweden, basically own a half of the market cap on the Stockholm Stock Exchange today. So he is a guy larger than life, but more the industrialist, and we work together on the board of Hand in Hand together. So we've been able to create 6.2 million jobs in India and in Africa. And if we use a multiplier of 5, which I think is low, and conservative, but I think, but even so, that means that we've actually radically changed the livelihoods of 30 million people. It's mind-boggling on a shoestring budget too. And that's the problem with all of these big NGOs in the world, and you're back to corruption. Every time I see, the Red Cross asking for money, I want to puke, because I know that they have 55% of the money goes to SG&A. 6% goes to SG&A in our case. 6 compared to 55. But it's basically the same with all of these big guys like the United Nations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, just like you put it so nicely in the beginning, I think the small entrepreneurial methodology, that's the only thing left that we really haven't given a chance to eliminate poverty going forward. And that's why we're doing so well within Hand in Hand. And it's really a simple model. So first we set up self-help groups. So we have 12 women. And the rules of the game there is that if one of the companies, micro companies, default, the other women have to chip in both with money and their help to get her back up on her feet. So it becomes a really strong community. We deliver training, 8 to 11 months, 7 different types of modules. And in some countries, like India, for example, Afghanistan as well, the illiteracy rate is over 60%. In Eastern Africa, it's not as high. It's more like 10 to 30%. But still, you can't give them, Brealey and Meyer's principles of corporate finance and then have them take an exam the next week, because most of them can't read and they're not sophisticated enough academically to be able to do it. So during these 20 years, we've developed very special training tools for them. And so I can just give you an example. So, the principle of how do you grow fast enough so that you can become profitable enough. But we all know that if you grow too fast, you run out of money and you actually can go belly up even though you're growing very well. And the opposite, if you don't grow enough, then obviously you'll never be able to get the revenue to be able to secure the costs that you have in your firm. So that's like a chapter in Finance 101 in your first semester of taking finance. How do you teach women that in the third world? So what they do is that they have the 12 women together and they give them each a balloon, and then they say that the woman who can blow up the balloon the biggest without it bursting wins a little prize. So, and then all of them do. So then you have the eager beavers that blow, 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 and then bang, the balloon bursts. And then you have the very timid women who who blow in, and there's hardly any air in the balloon, and then you have everything in between, and it's the in-between group that wins, right? So, but these training methods you have to have, because most of them don't read and write, so we don't give out, handouts and stuff like that. So it's really cool. And then we provide credit. So, and to talk about corruption, the microcredit world has a default rate of 40%. That's why it's so damn expensive. So these loans are, almost like loan shark loans. So if they would do it on their own, they would have to pay probably like anywhere between 80 and 150% in Africa annual interest. So what we do is that we help them source credit from more serious players like a Deutsche Bank, et cetera. So we get the interest rates down. They're still very high, but not, the loan shark rates. And the default rate for our women is less than 1%. It's amazing. A regular bank like, any Scandinavian bank or US bank that we deal with, their default rates are like 2 to 3%, and our women pay back the exception of 1%. So, and then we help them go to market, because if you have agricultural produce or pottery or whatever, if you sell it in the local market, like local market, you might get X. If you just distribute it to a little larger town, 50 kilometers away, you get up to 10X. So we help them go to market and find new channels so that they can get better pricing for their products. This is basically how simple it is. And then we took 120 of our consultants and executives to Tanzania just before COVID struck. And then we took, again, 120 almost a year ago to Nairobi. And in one of the Q&As afterwards, they asked the woman, or they asked the women in the 12 group. We were 12 and they were 12. And said, so how does life look like today after Hand in Hand came in and intervened by starting these entrepreneurship programs in your village? And how was life before? And then one woman very eloquently stood up and said, very simple. Number one, I can put 3 meals of food on the table every day. Before I could only put 1. Number 2, we have clean water, so we don't have all the time intestinal diseases. Number 3, which maybe is the most significant of these 4, is now I can afford to take my 3 little girls to school. And then number 4 is, and my husband doesn't come home and beat me up every night because he's so frustrated about our living standard. That's $100 loan on average, which gets repaid, and it's 6% overhead, which goes mainly to training and fundraising. So little and so much impact, and that's what really gets me going, because I was on the advisory board of World Vision, which is the world's largest. It has a Christian orientation. Hand in Hand is sort of non-religious in its nature, but even World Vision that was run by a CEO who had been a CEO twice in a Fortune 500 company, Rich Stearns. Even so, the overheads were like 15, 16, 17, 18%. So that's what's beautiful about Hand in Hand is, despite the fact that we've grown so fast, we still keep our overheads low. Why? Because we want the women to have that money and not a lot of, rich executives. So anyhow, so that gets me going. So thank you for listening. The lean growth methodology, I hope I've convinced you, works in large cap companies, small cap companies, Silicon Valley type companies, but also NGOs. So thank you.
I think you perfectly exemplify how entrepreneurs are society's problem solvers, so that was absolutely fantastic. What if people that are here want to co-invest with Hand in Hand? How can they do that?
Send me an email. and I'll get you in touch with our head office in London.
Okay.
So.
And indeed, we'll be sharing all of the emails and WhatsApp, a full delegate list. We did a kind of drop them at be setting. So anybody who wants to be in touch with anybody, we'll make that super simple for you in the next day. Because, I would have thought there's a followership. There's a natural followership here for hands at hands. I'm also, as somebody who kind of grew up with the tech VC community and so forth, what always impressed me about what Bruce was doing in Applied Value is from the industrial side to the internet and so forth. You've kind of ranged the gamut. Where do you think, have you learned from both sides? Has there been a learning from how would you speak to that for just a moment?
Well, I mean, one of the major trends is digitalization of large corporations. So, and they don't get it. They have these huge IT organizations with, on average, very low, sophistication among their coders and in large corps. So I think that, we've taught a lot in digitalization of the large corps, I would say. But then also, as I said, a lot of these startups that over time start becoming like, for example, Klarna, the payment system company in Sweden where I know the founders. There we have to go in and help them take out staff because they just grew and grew and grew, and the problem is that when you grow, So when you grow, I usually say it's like getting fat like a male human being, and I'm one of them, is that where do you grow when you add weight? In the middle, right? That's where companies also grow. And it's in the middle where you have the most politics because it's all the wannabe guys that are there. And they just shuffle paper and slow down processes and everything like that. So we've even taught, as I said, take learnings from the lean side, from the Toyota production system thinking to software companies, and because they need it badly. And so there's perfect learning, export of ideas back and forth there. So this is a group that knows a lot about technology discontinuity, right? That's what a lot of people in this audience have built businesses, taking advantage of things that are almost non-linear. You can't kind of get to the future by just going like this because there's been some sort of jump to the future, and there's a kind of way of how do we bring the present to the future. So it seems that there's and we talked about the industrial, but the Mittelstand, of which again we've got a lot of people with experience in the Mittelstand. What would you propose if you're kind of overseeing the kind of the state of Europe, because many of us are Europeans, and you say, how should in general the entrepreneurial VC-backed community engage with the Mittelstand? What would you, and what do you think the role of like Follow the Entrepreneur or organizations like what we're doing, how can we connect these two in a more systematic way to accelerate them? What would be the obvious things that you would recommend? Well, I think we're starting a program with Hitachi, and they basically have three strategic thrusts. One is digitalization. The second one is if you will, going green. And then the third, which is really fluffy, that they just call innovation. So coming up with crazy new ideas. And but the digitalization part there, that's where they acquired Global Logic, which had owned by Apex and had 26,000 engineers to be able to digitalize these companies. So I think that there's a huge market for software companies now to really digitalize these big corporations, because once again, with the sophistication of software and today, there's so many things that are done manually today that could be done automated instead. So I think that's a huge opportunity. So
questions in the audience for Bruce? Yes, please.
Yes.
Please, Carlos, yeah.
Just one question, because I was thinking with all the presentation.
Yeah.
And I'm coming with manufacturing excellence background.
Yeah.
I'm in corporate for the last 20 years. Okay. And I'm agreeing, the companies, they need to go in that direction of digitalization. But the main problem is not the process itself. Is the change in the businesses, and the change in the middle or in the executive level, because they don't have the brains to work in that level. How do you work that part of human side when you start the process with the company?
We have compared to when I was at ADL or Arthur D. Little and McKinsey, BCG, is that we have smaller teams and we put a greater emphasis on training, just like we do at Hand in Hand, like I showed. So that because otherwise you become dependent forever on a consulting firm. So, okay, now they solve your problem. Okay. Then they don't do anything. And then they have, because they haven't de-weeded every day. And then they call you back, and then it's a big same mess again. I mean, selfishly, that's great for our revenue, but you want to have a sustainable model. So and that's why we usually talk about the 3 S's. First one is size the opportunity. Second one is seize the opportunity, and then the most important part, sustain the opportunity, so you don't go back to square one again in 3 years. And that's exactly here. I mean, if you interview these, they would say, thank God for Hand in Hand. And now I'm off to the races, and I absolutely don't need Hand in Hand anymore. And they're very proud of it. And we're even more proud that they say that they don't need us anymore. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Other questions, other comments? Anyone, any other comment for Bruce? Yes,
One
please,
question
Andreas.
to Andreas Oszensky from another group.
Yeah.
One question to Hand in Hand. How do you ensure they have the scalability? Because they really need people, you need a network, you need a local network, you need right partners. So that sounds like how do you get the speed and the lean approach to
Right. So we have a very standardized training program, very standardized way of sourcing microcredit from financial institutions, but what we're doing, and that's why I'm going down to Nairobi now, is that we've committed from all of our control investment companies 5% of, and you saw that our EBITDA was 62 million, so that equals $3 million that our companies have committed to Hand in Hand to the accelerator program that we call it, and that is basically, if you do the math, we started 4.8 million micro companies, and we've created 6.2 million jobs. So you don't have to be a MIT math professor to figure out that almost all of these companies are one-man shows or one-women shows. 94% of all of our microcredit goes to women. And then you could say, is it a gender and neutrality thing? No, not at all. It's very simple, because if we gave it to men, they would have drunk up the money instead. So I think, talking about corruption, I think males are more corrupt than women here. They care about their kids, etc. So anyhow, so we scale it finally when it comes to the 1 woman, 2 women thing. What we now have to do is take the best entrepreneurs and then give them more microcredit, but then we have to secure it because they don't want to take the risk of going back down to hell again. So, and then give them training, because one thing is giving training for you to become a one-man show. It's a totally different thing to now ask them, now you're going to run a company with 20 women instead. So, so that's exactly why I'm going to Nairobi on Sunday to kick off that program. And we have initial financing from our own companies of $3 million. So.
Now, you have an investment business. When and why do you decide to invest?
Basically, opportunistically, mainly. Of course, in the verticals, the companies that are a little bigger, they have their own M&A program, which we support, but we're agnostic. I mean, if we see an opportunity in industry that we have never touched, for example, we're now rolling up very successfully the bread and bakery business in Sweden. I mean, we knew nothing about bread making or baking or anything like that, but we were very able, and now we do have the economies of scale that we talked about, and we use the lean methodology. So you know, if Probably where we have respect that we really have not is probably the finance and insurance industries. We really don't know our way there. Of course, we negotiate with banks and stuff like that. There, I would be very hesitant. But anything in technology or in industrial companies, we're agnostic there. So.
All right. Well, Bruce is going to be with us.
Yeah,
all day
until
today,
Sunday, right?
Until
Yeah.
Sunday. So very much. Thank you, Bruce, for coming out
Right.
from Florida.
Can I share one more
Of course
thing?
you can. Of course you can. Yes.
So one of our pro bono consultants he used to run the marketing department at Harvard Business School. And his short name, and I don't even know his long name because I've never called him anything else, but the professor's name is Cash Reinham. And then he went to the dean at the time and said, you know what, I would love to start a whole new department at Harvard Business School, and it's called Social Enterprise Tag. And so he runs the Social Enterprise Department at Harvard Business School, and he's done that for 15 years now. He's been an advisor on and off to us at Hand in Hand. And we had training in Nairobi. This goes back 10 years. And he put up a slide and he said, why is there poverty in the world? And by the way, he's a trained economist. So, and sometimes in economics, you have like weird views of the world. So, and then the next slide, it said market failure. And then I stood up and said in front of everyone, I said, I think there's another type of failure that is the real reason why so many people live in poverty and so few people live in abundance. And so market failure or heart failure. We don't think with our hearts. We're stingy, we're greedy, and don't really give a hoot. I mean, I think in many ways, COVID was really good that it happened because it showed us that we're really not that smart after all. I always say that I was the most blessed guy on earth because I lived in the two only places on planet Earth where people didn't lose their minds at the political level. One is Florida, the other one is Sweden. We never locked down. We let the kids go to school every day without masks, and we had lower death rates than almost anyone and everyone. Another thing with COVID, which is really disgusting, is that we put $6 trillion, and that caused also all of the inflation and thereby interest rates because we were printing money. So we printed $6 trillion in America. Supposedly 1 million died of COVID, if you look at the stats during this period. I don't believe that because we know that if you were in a car accident but tested positive for COVID, you didn't die of the car accident, you died of COVID. So because the government would subsidize all of the costs for treatment during that period. So anyhow, but even if it's a million, and I'm pretty good at math, but I had to rerun the numbers again and again to really see that I wasn't off. So you put in 6 trillion, there are 1 million that die. How much money did you invest per death? $6 million. How much money did we give to the third world for COVID? Almost nothing.
Yeah.
And then you say that every, if you went around and said, is a life worth the same in Ethiopia as in Midtown Manhattan? No. And if you say that, I would almost like to punch you in the face because it's not, literally not. And the best example was the COVID dilemma. So once again, since I'm half Jewish and Christian, one of my favorite books of the Bible is the book of Proverbs. And King Solomon wrote this: above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
Wow, beautiful.
So those are my last words.
Thank you.